Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News at the South Florida Conservative News Center. It is Saturday, November 29th, 11 a.m. Hope you all enjoyed a Thanksgiving dinner that was non-pareil. Unfortunately, we're going to have to talk a little bit about the Washington, D.C. guardsman shooting and our thoughts. And this is taken in the aggregate, I guess you could say, and what we see has occurred versus what many people are rushing to judgment on. Obviously, the reason this is not discussed the day of the shooting was because it was going to be crazy, everybody running to get to a deadline to be the first to give you the wrong information, which we know was given out and has been built on ever since. So we are going to be taking apart some of the more suspicious stories coming out on this one. And unfortunately, this involves a dead National Guardsman or woman, and another one is in critical condition, and a foreign national and an identity that does not seem to add up at all. Excuse me. But we are going to go forward from there. Say within hours of the ambush shooting near the White House, the Biden aligned media rolled out a perfectly packaged narrative. The shooter was an Afghan evacuee, a former CIA linked zero unit commando, a war traumatized veteran. You've heard that story before, right? We just didn't see it coming. It is very nice. It is very clean and convenient, and it is incredibly too convenient to probably be real because not one piece of that story has been backed up by hard evidence. And then we'll say not one. So let's walk through some of the anomalies before you already say your uncle said this or your cousin said that, because the anomalies, they are not subtle here. All right. And this is what happens with a good media disinformation program. The first sign that something was off is there are zero members. And this is when they're talking about what was really the story here with this guy. There are zero photos of this man in a uniform. There is no ID card. There is something that is floating around now, which I would say is meh. I'll give you a zero on that one. In fact, that actually makes it look worse if you look at the photo in that ID versus the photo that they are showing versus the first photo that came out. But we'll go back on this. We're going to just take it apart that he was a member of this unit and go from there. He has no old ID cards. He has no unit portrait. He has no operational photographs. Not showing him in the so-called zero unit when you can look up online and see what the patch looks like versus this fake ID thing, which does not have the same designation. He supposedly served in this unit for 8 years. Think about that. These Afghan CIA partner units were very tight, very tiny, and constantly photographed by U.S. handlers, interpreters, and operators during missions. Yet absolutely nobody, as of this Saturday the 29th, nobody with any credibility, not a single American who worked with those units has recognized him. If you recall when this all went on, there were Green Berets, there were this, there were that, not at the shooting, but at the fall of Afghanistan, trying to get their old associates out. Remember that whole thing? Well, he would have been known to somebody, right? He would have been known to somebody if he was in that unit. Where are those people that are like, I liked him or I didn't trust the son of a bitch. I didn't know how he got in here, right? Where's JSOC, which is Joint Special Operations Command? Silent. CIA field officers, silent, except somehow we got the CIA story, right? Which is always impossible to verify because they will always say they don't know. Any of the other Afghan commandos that are in the United States, which there are some, silent. This isn't how silence works in that world. This is how absence works. This is what it looks like when someone simply wasn't there. So, what we're thinking, the biggest red flag, before the government even settled on a name, the public was fed an AI altered face of the shooter. You'll see that the photo with this article is also different than the one that they have shown in the past and the one on the ID card. The first official suspect image, the one that went and sent social media on a wild goose chase hunting information. They already had the shooter. They already had him. The photograph that was AI altered was somebody got a hold of the video footage from across the street of the guy on the gurney and augmented that with AI to build a face. Now they didn't know whose face they were building, so all it did was clean it up and it gave you a third person in our lineup. There is a video, there is an image of some bullshit ID, which I don't find super credible. Also doesn't really match up with the guy who is the picture they're using now, plus the first one. Okay. The one that we have on ours, I think, is probably the better of the three. I could be wrong, but what do I know? I'm not the agency, right? Uh, that didn't happen by accident. This whole AI enhanced putting this thing out. Someone either didn't have a clear photo of the suspect, which we know. I'm giving you reasons why this would have occurred. Didn't have a matching identity on file, or needed to muddy the waters while the real narrative was assembled. So either way, it tells us one thing. They didn't actually know who they had in custody. In fact, have you seen a photo of the guy? Have you seen a booking photo of him? Has anybody? Please tell me if you have, because we'll just take this video right down. All right. He's already been booked. He was booked when they brought him in. He was booked in the gurney somewhere. All right. And they didn't know who they had in custody at first, and they probably don't even know now. And the reason you have that going on, and we'll just let's take this back a step just for those of you who are going to fight with us over this. And I'm not saying that we're right. I'm saying that this has not been thought through. That unit, look it up, and then look up the term either ghost employee or ghost members. There was a scandal in the Afghan military where all these kind of units, especially something which was going to get paid in US dollars, in cash, would have ghost members, which were just names that were put on a piece of paper that the warlord or the operative or whoever, and in some cases, as we have found out, the American Special Operations community members were keeping the money and these guys didn't exist. All right. So there's also that option there when you're trying to figure out who in the zero unit this is. It could be somebody entirely that did not exist who during the fall was able to buy an identity. I think it was $20,000 to get out or more. You'd have to look up how much it cost to get out when the US was doing its withdrawal. Zero vetting. Okay. So now we'll talk about the vetting, or lack thereof. During the 2021 evacuation, tens of thousands of Afghans were admitted under Joe Biden's watch using incomplete biometrics, rushed paper files, inconsistent translations, and affidavits taken at face value. Not only were identities often unreliable or unverifiable, but many were literally created on the spot at the Kabul airport or at U.S. intake centers. Go look it up. It is totally true. So we'll repeat that. Names were invented or borrowed because the system had no time to verify anything. And in a situation of, I'm not going to say obscure, but an obscure CIA run commando unit, there was no way you were verifying this thing. Not at the airport with the country falling down around your ears. The CIA was already pretty much gone from what we understand. So when the government tells you, trust us, this is definitely Rahmanullah Lakanwal, Waka Waka. My answer is, how do you know that? Because every indicator says that they don't know. They're using the identity the shooter arrived with, not necessarily the identity that's real. They, by their own admission, in a lot of these cases, don't have the standard fingerprints, the DNA, the this, the that, the other things, which we could easily have kept track of in this day and age. But since we left the country and took nothing with us, theoretically, it would be very hard to verify these guys, which is the argument at the time. So let's look at three of the most likely explanations based on the evidence or the lack of evidence you have. And this is just standard work there, kids. Scenario number one, we'll call this identity substitution. The shooter used the identity of a real Afghan who A, never left Afghanistan, B, died during the evacuation or sometime before and it was unreported, or C, was separated and never boarded the plane. His name lives on in DHS paperwork, but the man himself does not, which means also, like I said, ghost employee. Scenario two, fake identity assigned during evacuation. The shooter may be traveling under a placeholder identity created during the chaos. If that's the case, then the US government has no idea who he really is. He is going to say who he is, and that is basically how this is going to run. Or scenario three, and this is the politically explosive one, which would not put it past the guys that are fomenting assassination plans in the United States as we speak. The zero unit story was planted to redirect blame away from Biden's catastrophic vetting failure. Because if this shooter wasn't a vetted ally, wasn't a CIA partner, and wasn't who DHS said he was, then the administration knowingly admitted a dangerous unknown. And we did a video a long time ago. You can look it up yourself. It was at a time a fellow had come across the southern border, and everybody who was anybody swore he was this terrorist from, I think, Tajikistan or something like that. And they're like, oh, no, he's not. But they never were able to get him on. The guy loved being on video. He said, I'll show you what I can do now that I'm here. Because they're like, you're a nobody. He's like, I'll show you what a nobody I am. He admitted to being the terrorist, and nobody took him in. Okay? So these things have happened under the Biden administration. And, they knowingly admitted these dangerous people. And that would be the end of the OAW program's credibility. Every Afghan intake case is suspect or should be considered suspect. Every DHS official who signed off on these files would be exposed, and they would say better to build a fast narrative than to admit the truth. And by them, we do not mean Donald Trump and his people. We mean the holdouts in the from the Biden administration that are fighting daily to stifle the executive branch of the United States government, to hold it in place so that the Democrats and the socialists can win and take back whatever they want. And why the silence from JSOC and CIA matters. The U.S. Special Operations community behaves pretty predictably for considering who they're supposed to be, right? When a real Afghan ally is harmed or accused, the networks would have activated former Green Berets, confirm the identity, Rangers post mission photos, CIA handlers verify their partner fighters, interpreters crowdsource details, veterans speak publicly. This occurred in the situation, I think it was 8 months ago or so. A former Afghan interpreter who was living in the Midwest, I believe somewhere, you can look it up, was shot by one of the locals. So he was living in the hood. He got killed in the hood. And they said, isn't this a bitch? He came, he fought it for us. We brought him over here. He was living in the hood and he gets murdered. Well, so did our service people. So get over yourselves, right? But all the things that I just mentioned came up in conversation during that story of the shooting. And that's, like I said, that's what happened when he was murdered. The SOF community rallied instantly and loudly. This time, nothing, not a whisper. That silence speaks volumes. And I'm saying that, we're not talking this is some secret league of assassins here. We're talking it's a commando unit, right? Somebody will tell you a different story. Somebody will put on a veteran's hat. Someone will say, well, I heard of these guys. I was sitting back there having an ice cream sandwich, next to the PX, and I heard these guys are some pretty bad dudes, but nobody had ever seen them, right? Probably because most of them didn't exist on anything but paper, and people were taking money for them. But that doesn't mean they were all that way, because there were various dedicated groups of commandos. I'm suggesting this particular man may not be that guy. So it suggests the zero unit veteran story is fabricated, where the person in custody isn't the person the government claims he is. So what happens, or what needs to happen now, is what we need to do immediately as a government is that you have to release the biometric record verifying who this man actually is. They have to release the intake paperwork from Kabul. They have to verify whether the real Lakanwal is alive, dead, or missing, or even existed at all. They have to force DHS and the FBI to confirm on the record whether this man's identity has ever been independently validated, and subpoena the internal communications around the fake AI image that was circulated during the first few hours, because right now, absolutely none of this passes the smell test. You're going to see, like I said, this other earlier shot of him with this ID. Of all the things to keep, that's not what the regular ID looks like. You can go and do all this on your own. It's a Saturday now, right? Spend 2 hours blowing this holes in this story on your own. Don't listen to anything that we're telling you. Use the checklist that we would use. This is a checklist that is used every time. It has very little to do with this particular story. You set the checklist, you put the story against it, and you see how much doesn't fit. And that's when you decide this is a hit piece, this is a cover up, this is whatever it is. A National Guardsman is dead. Another one is injured critically. The American people are being fed a story, as they would say, with more holes than Swiss cheese. It is not xenophobia. It is not partisanship. This is about the federal government admitting a foreign national with an unverified identity into the United States and then scrambling to rewrite his history after a murder. He didn't walk out of his door, walk 60 feet down the street, and shoot both of these people in the head. They say he traveled however far he traveled. Well, where are the news people at his house? Where are the news people talking to people that knew him from the neighborhood? Most of these people try to stay around other people from the same ethnic background. It's how it works. We're going to find out he probably didn't speak English with the Queen's accent, right? So he'd want to be around other people that spoke whatever, Pashtun or whatever the hell he's speaking, right? This is about accountability and truth. And above all, since we are set to be hit by these lone wolves, probably for their next 10 years, unless we can really break the back of intranational interstate terrorism, which we are going to see more and more of. This is the tip of the iceberg. So that way you never trace the guy back to anything. You know what I'm saying? We never have somebody that we can bring the hammer to. I can't go to the DNC over this guy. You can try to get him under Biden, and then what are you going to do? Same thing that we haven't done with Mayorkas already, right? Here's another thing to get Mayorkas on, which nobody will do. It is about accountability. I get tired of saying it, but it's just, you see these things and it's like this, and it's like, it's an accountability issue. It's a truth issue. It's a national security issue. I don't care about what happened in Afghanistan when it comes to this. You need to know who these guys are, how many of them are in the country, how many fake IDs that they sell in the last 5 days before the country turned to shit, right? If you had a laminate, I bet you could have gotten through that gate. A laminate and $20,000 for sure, from what we hear. This is going to bring all those stories back. It should become, since the government doesn't want to do any real work, Congress or the Senate should hold a hearing on the entirety of the fall of Kabul and the Kabul airport, and all the people that were lost there, and all the people that were promised to be brought out when we decided that we weren't going to fight anymore, or that it was politically expedient to deny Donald Trump his peace through strength by killing these people and fucking that country and giving it to the Chinese, which was probably the plan all along. So that's what we have for you now. I suggest, as we always say, do your own research. Don't fall for everybody who's running around with a fucking beard and a Black Rifle coffee hat telling you anything at this point. This is everything we've given you is very easy to understand. This is how it's done. You know, would you feel better if we said it was how JSOC would have done it? Would you feel better if we said this is how DIA would have done it? This is how it's done. So go out, look for yourself, see these issues, and make up your own decision. And on that note, have a nice weekend, and I will talk to you later on. Goodbye.